Right, ding, ding, ding. Last orders, please, gentlemen. Time, gentlemen, please. Time, gentlemen, please. This is happening in Downing Street during lockdown.
Yes, so some individuals remained in the building and carried on drinking alcohol into the early hours.
I believe that's called a lock-in. So they had a lock-in. They had a lock-in at Downing Street during the lockdown. A lock-in during lockdown. There's your headline, if there was a newspaper in the country with the guts to write it.
So exit logs show that some left after midnight and others between 01:45 and 02:45. Two members of staff stayed later.
And this is, of course, we need to remind us, this is Boris Johnson's house. So if he was, minded on even a matter of principle to object to it, he's only got to go downstairs in his wee willy winky nightshirt and hat. And of course, here we go. Here he is. Let's go. So we're not going across. My apologies. Apparently there was cheering in the chamber.
I was just going to say the last person on that party, Prince Philip's party, left at 20 minutes past 4 in the morning.
That's not Prince Philip's party. The party on the night before Prince Philip. Say that time again, would you?
It was 4:20 in the morning. Let me just check that.
4:20 in the morning?
Yeah, 4:20.
I'm so old there. When's the last time you were burning the midnight oil?
One person left at 11 minutes past 3 in the morning.
11 minutes past 3 in the morning. That's the exit log, so that's... And Sue Gray would have had access to that. And so, of course, could Boris Johnson if he was minded to. A few people suggesting that hashtag Chundergate needs to be... But I disagree, actually. I try to inject a little bit of levity. I'm sure most of it falls flat by the time it comes out of your radio. But this is really, really, really serious stuff, especially when you think back to some of the calls that we took half an hour ago from people who were enduring the worst sort of privations and experiences by dint of actually doing their best to follow the rules and follow the guidance and follow the regulations, the guidance that Matt Hancock resigned after breaching, the sort of spirit of the situation that Allegra Stratton resigned after breaching, all while Boris Johnson was claiming that nothing had gone wrong, all guidance had been observed, and that there was absolutely no case to answer. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. Here is the line you need to remember. He wasn't sorry when you didn't know, and he's only sorry that you do. And the man of whom I speak, Boris Johnson, is poised to get to his feet in the House of Commons to open proceedings for today's PMQs.
Just said about the reports of the fatal shooting in a Texan primary school. Our thoughts are with all those affected by this horrific attack. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I welcomed the Emir of Qatar to Downing Street. It's excellent news that Qatar announced it will invest up to £10 billion into the UK through our new strategic investment partnership. And not only will it boost local economies and support jobs, it will support our green economy and decarbonisation. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Anthony Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cambridge is one of the most expensive places to live in the country, but unlike many cheaper places, NHS workers in the city get no high cost of living supplement. So NHS workers in Cambridge pay higher rents than NHS workers in outer London boroughs like Redbridge and Croydon and Bexley and Barking, and yet they get paid 15% less. This makes it very difficult for the NHS in Cambridge, including Addenbrooke's Hospital, to retain and recruit staff. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, work with me to make sure that NHS workers in South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge get paid fairly?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for his constituents and for Addenbrooke's, and we're very proud of our NHS, and that's why we're putting record investment in, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that the independent NHS pay review body will listen carefully to what my honourable friend has just said.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my thoughts also, and I know the thoughts of the whole House, are with the families of the victims of yesterday's school shooting in Texas. 19 children have died, some as young as 7, and 2 adults believed to be teachers. It is an unspeakable tragedy, and our hearts are with the American people. Last weekend marked the anniversary of both the Manchester bombing and the murder of Lee Rigby, and we remember them this year as we do every year. And today is also the anniversary of the killing of George Floyd, a reminder that we must all tackle the racism that is still experienced by so many in our country and beyond. Mr. Speaker, the Sugray report was published this morning, and I look forward to discussing that during this afternoon's statement with the Prime Minister. For now, I want to focus on the cost of living affecting the whole country. Mr. Speaker, since we stood here last week, and I asked the Prime Minister yet again to back Labour's plans for a windfall tax to reduce energy bills, hundreds of millions of pounds have been added to bills of families across the country, and hundreds of millions of pounds have landed in the bank accounts of energy companies. It sounds like he's finally seen sense, and the inevitable U-turn may finally have arrived. So when can people across the country expect him to use those oil and gas profits to bring down their bills?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing original about a Labour plan to tax business. There's nothing remarkable. They want to tax business the whole time, every day. Labour wants to put up taxes on business. And what we're doing is we're helping people. He asks when we're going to help people. We're helping people now.
Oh, chest. I can't breathe. Oh, shit.
Mr. Speaker, and we're putting £22 billion into people's pockets already, cutting council tax by £150, cutting fuel duty, cutting national insurance contributions by an average of £330 for people who pay NICs. And Mr. Speaker, how can we afford that? Because we have a strong economy, because we came out of COVID fast, Mr. Speaker, which would not have been possible if we'd listened to the party opposite.
15 tax rises, and he pretends they're a low-tax government. It's been, Mr. Speaker, it's been 4.5 months since Labour first called for a windfall tax on oil and gas profits. I've raised it week in, week out, and every week he has a new reason for not doing it. The Business Secretary said it's bad. The Justice Secretary called it disastrous. Even this weekend, the Health Secretary and the Northern Ireland Secretary opposed it. He ordered all of his MPs to vote against it last week. And now, surprise, surprise, he's backing it. Prime Minister, I'm told that hindsight is a wonderful thing. But Mr. Speaker, whilst he dithered and delayed, households across the country suffered when they didn't need to. What?
Peter. Mr. Bone, a man who always wants to catch my eye is not going the best way to do so. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, whilst he dithered and delayed, households across the country suffered when they didn't need to.
Exactly.
What is it about the Sugray report that first attracted him to a U-turn this week?
Mr. Speaker, there is no surprise about Labour's lust. There's no surprise about Labour's lust to put up taxes. There's nothing original about his thought. They get off on it. They absolutely love to confiscate other people's assets. What we prefer to do, Mr. Speaker, is make sure that we have the measures that are in place to drive investment in our country and drive jobs. And it's thanks to the steps that we took, thanks to the fact that we came out of COVID faster than any other European country. Would not have been possible if we'd listened to him. That we now have unemployment at the listen to this. They used to care about this, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment at the lowest level since 1974. Put that in your pipe.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I actually thought with this U-turn he might actually get his head out of the sand, but obviously not. The reality is that every day of his dithering and his delay, £53 million has been added to Britain's household bills. Whilst he's distracted trying to save his own job, the country has been counting the cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
But complacency is nothing new for this government. Back in October, the Chancellor delivered a mini-budget that has to be reread to be believed.
Unbelievable.
With inflation already climbing,
Absolutely.
he said that he understood people were concerned about it and the government was ready to act. Since then, inflation has risen to a 40-year high, the highest rate of any G7 country. If the government was so ready to act 6 months ago, why hasn't it?
But, Mr. Speaker, the government has acted, and my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, continues to act. This is the government that we not only put in the living wage, Mr. Speaker, it was a Conservative institution, but we've now raised it by a record amount. We've raised it by £1,000, Mr. Speaker, a record amount. We've helped families on universal credit have another £1,000, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the measures, the £9.1 billion we've already put in to support people's costs of heating. We're abating the costs of fuel for people up and down the country. And of course, we're going to do more, Mr. Speaker. We're going to put our arms around the people of this country, just as we did throughout the COVID pandemic. But the reason we can do that is because we took the tough decisions to drive the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, which wouldn't have been possible if you listened to him, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we have, let me take another statistic, youth unemployment. They used to care about it. Youth unemployment at or near a record low.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just the Chancellor back in September. The Prime Minister called fears about inflation unfounded. He was the last person to spot the cost of living crisis, just as he's the last person to back Labour's plan to help people through it. And Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just on inflation that they got it badly wrong. In the same speech, the Chancellor boasted about growth. Prime Minister does today. How we were going to do better than all our major competitors. It was obvious that he was being complacent. And lo and behold, Britain is set to have the lowest growth of any major country except Russia. Despite our brilliant businesses and all we have to offer, why has his government inflicted on Britain the twin-headed hydra of the highest inflation and the lowest growth?
Mr. Speaker, he loves running this country down. How many times did he come to this place? How many times did he come to this place and say that the United Kingdom had the highest COVID death rate in Europe? How many times? He was proved completely wrong. Did he ever apologise, Mr. Speaker? Absolutely not. Did he ever take it back? Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. Actually, because of the steps we took, last year we had the fastest growth in the G7, and we will return to the fastest growth by 2024, 2025, thanks to the decisions that this government took, Mr. Speaker. And they don't care about getting people into jobs. They don't care. We care about the working people of this country, making sure we have a high wage, high skill, high employment economy. And that's what we're delivering.
He talks about running this country down. He is running this country down. And it wasn't just complacency on Labour's windfall tax, which he's now backing. It wasn't just complacency on inflation, which is now through the roof. And it wasn't just complacency on growth, which is now spluttering along at the back of the pack. Because his Chancellor also claimed that people should keep more of the rewards of their efforts. And then he put their taxes up. So does the Prime Minister want to explain to hard-working people whose wages are running out sooner and sooner each month and who are facing astronomical bills and prices just how his 15 tax rises since taking office have helped them to keep more of their rewards in their pocket?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, what we're doing is making sure after a huge pandemic that we are funding our vital public services, which we can, because of the steps that we take. What we're also doing is making sure that we put more money back into people's pockets by the measures that I've outlined today, whether through cutting national insurance contributions or lifting the living wage or lifting universal credit, Mr. Speaker. But all this is made possible. Because we took the responsible and sensible steps to protect our economy throughout COVID and then to come out strongly. And he's completely wrong about this country's growth performance, Mr. Speaker. He runs it down. He runs it down. He was proved wrong about COVID. He's going to be proved wrong again.
Yes, Starmer.
Just delusional. Mr. Speaker, last week I raised the case of Phoenix Halliwell, whose kidney condition means he needs daily dialysis and whose energy bill has gone through the roof as a result. I'm glad that as a result government officials got in touch with Phoenix yesterday, and I hope that will result in more support for people who are vulnerable. But it shouldn't be left to Labour to turn up week after week to make him aware of the consequences of his dither and delay. So I want to raise another issue where the government is sleepwalking into disaster. With the summer holidays looming, there are reports that the Home Office already has a backlog of 500,000 passports to issue. That's potentially more than 500,000 people worrying whether they will get away this summer. So can the Prime Minister reassure people that they won't miss out on their holidays due to the failures of his Home Office?
Well, I thank you very much, but I can tell him actually that what we're doing is massively increasing the speed with which the Passport Office deliver, and to the best of my knowledge, everybody is getting their passport within 4 to 6 weeks, Mr. Speaker. But that is because we are driving the leadership of this country, and we are getting things done that would never have been possible if we listened to them. We got Brexit done, Mr. Speaker, when he voted 48 times. 48 times he voted to undo the will of the people. We got the vaccine rollout done when he would have kept us in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker. We were the first European country to help the Ukrainians resist Vladimir Putin. Yes. Do you think, does anybody seriously believe for a second that they would have done it?
Some are trying to boo, some are trying to cheer. The worst of it is I can't hear the Prime Minister. Come on, Prime Minister.
Let me say very plainly, does anybody seriously think for a second that the Labour Party would have done that, Mr. Speaker, when eight of the shadow front bench, including the shadow Foreign Secretary, who is mysteriously not in his place, voted recently to get rid of this country's independent nuclear deterrent. And he campaigned to put Jeremy Corbyn in Downing Street, Mr. Speaker. We get on, we do the difficult things. We take the tough decisions, Mr. Speaker. Social care, we're fixing it.
Prime Minister, we both can't be on our feet. I'm trying to help you. You've got to help me as well. And I'm sure you've got to the end because Mr. Stewart's itching to get his question. Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister gets passionate, things get done. Brexit is done. If they could contain themselves, the vaccine rollout done. So will my right honourable friend personally intervene so that the immunocompromised, like my constituent Scott, can get access to British wonder drug Evusheld, and then they, not next winter, not next year, but now, so that they can enjoy this summer and enjoy their freedom just like the rest of us.
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I know that my honourable friend has taken a keen interest in this for a while. Evusheld could potentially reduce the risk of infection, as he says. We've got to look at the available evidence before we can make a decision.
We'll stay with this for a while. There may be some Conservative MPs who ask some difficult questions. It was suggested earlier that might happen, and then we'll pull out as usual, otherwise, after Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to join others today to express my deepest sorrow at the horrific events in Texas yesterday. 19 children and 2 teachers have needlessly lost their lives. Many of us in Scotland will be remembering the tragic events that took place in Dunblane 26 years ago. The thoughts and prayers of the SNP are with the families suffering today, but also our hope that lawmakers will finally act to bring the scourge of gun violence that plagues the United States to an end. Mr. Speaker, the reports that the Prime Minister in Downing Street's law-breaking have been damning. Empty bottles littering offices, rooms so crowded people were sitting on each other's laps, and security forced to intervene because the parties were so outrageous. At the centre was the Prime Minister orchestrating it, grabbing a glass for himself in order to toast the partygoers. For 8 months, we've heard every excuse under the sun. But now, we've all seen the damning photo evidence. While people stayed at home to protect the NHS, the Prime Minister was engaging in drinking and debauchery that makes a mockery of the gut-wrenching sacrifices that each and every person made. Will the Prime Minister now take the opportunity and resign?
Mr. Speaker, I can tell the right honourable gentleman that much as I appreciate his advice, he'll have a further opportunity, which I'm sure he will take with his customary length to debate that matter in the course of the statement which will follow directly after PMQs.
I'm not happy. Ian Blackfield.
Matters, Mr. Speaker, but it's all a joke to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has lost the trust of the public. He has lost what little moral authority he had left. The Prime Minister has apologised many times, not because he feels any genuine remorse. He still refuses to even admit that there were parties and that he presided over them. He apologised for one simple reason: he got caught. The reality is, no apology will ever be enough for the families of people who lost loved ones, for the families who followed the rules, who stayed at home whilst their nearest and dearest to them were dying, and are now forced to look at photographs of the Prime Minister surrounded by drink, toasting to a party in the middle of a lockdown. If the Prime Minister will not accept that he must resign, then the Tory benches must act. This Prime Minister, who has broken the law and shown a cavalier attitude to the truth, cannot be allowed to remain in office. Prime Minister, time is up. Resign. Resign. Resign before this House is forced to remove him.
Prime Minister.
I thank him very much, and I would just direct him again. I think it would be to his advantage to look through the report, and then I think we should return to it after PMQs.
We now come to Jonathan Gillis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. High streets and heritage means a lot to the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork. Burslem and Tunstall, 2 of the great 6 towns of Stoke-on-Trent, are plagued with rogue and absent landlords who are too happy to let shops sit empty and historically important buildings such as Price and Kensington Teapot Works fall into ruin, which is why I introduced my proper maintenance of land bill to increase fines on these ruinous owners. Can my right honourable friend confirm that as part of the government's planning reform, he will adopt my bill which imposes a new unlimited fine so these reckless reprobates can be held
22 minutes after 12 is the time. I think we can all live without hearing what Jonathan Gillis has to say about anything, can't we?